Pesachim Daf Pei Zayin. Today's email comes from David Address. David Address was in the hospital with COVID, and he says he was in the ER and he received numerous phone calls from the Chevra. He's so appreciative. And then he writes, your impact from your Torah teachings and your wonderful, inspiring stories to even reading your medical records are seeping through thousands of Klal Yisrael. I'm so glad I can be part of it and the MDY family. Thank you, and thank you to the support team, David Address. You need to tell me that diet. I need to lower my cholesterol next. All right, Rav David, Refuah Shlema. So we're starting a brand new Perek Ha'isha. You have a woman who just got married. She's torn between her new husband and her father. Both of them made a carbon Pesach. So typically, the Mishnah tells us she should eat from her husband's. She cannot pick and choose. She's going to go with her husband's. The Gemara explains because she's into her husband. But let's say she's not into her husband, she keeps on running back to her father, then the halach would be that she eats from any carbon she wants. The minhag was, and still is, that the first Pesach, the first regal, you go to the wife goes to her parents' house for the Seder. So in that case, she gets to choose before the Shechita. But if she, in that situation, is very much into going back to her parents' house, then she eats from her father's carbon. A yasim, an orphan, who has an apitropis, two apitropsim, and they both make a carbon Pesach for him, so he gets to choose either or. However, a slave who has two masters, he cannot eat from any of them. The Gemara will explain. If a slave is a chatzi ben chayrin, that is, in a situation, let's say he had two masters and one of them released him, so he doesn't eat even from his new master, his only master's carbon. The pasuk says, "Achois lanu ktana v'shadayim ein lo." The Gemara tells us that is referring to Elam. They didn't have the ability to give over their fruit. Elam produced Daniel and Mordechai, who were tremendous Gdolei Hadar, but they had no one to give over their Torah. But in Bavel, they had Ezra HaSofer, who was able to give over Torah. The pasuk says, "Ani chayma." I'm the protector. What protects Klal Yisrael? That's Torah. V'shodai ki the towers. These are the Talmidei Chachamim. Rava says chayma refers to Knesset Yisrael. Migdalos are the shuls and the Batei Midrashos. Asher bonenu kinetim. Our young Bachrim who never tasted chet are like young saplings, like young trees that have no damage. These are the young girls that are full of taiva, yet they keep themselves for the husbands or wives who tell their husbands about their nida, even though they have taiva, and in that schos, the heichal will be built. The var Hashem asher hoya lo Yishaya. Even though there were four Nevi'im, Hoshea was the greatest of the four. You had Yeshaya, Amos, and Micha. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Bonecha chatu, your children Hoshea, they sinned. So instead of Hoshea telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're your children, the sons of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, the entire world is yours. Take them and place them in another nation. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to teach him a lesson. Some even say it was just a nevuah. Some say it actually happened. And he said, you must marry a Zaina. And you're going to have 3 children from her, and then I'm going to tell you to divorce her. So, in fact, he had the first child, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, call him Israel. It's the musig of Galus, planting somewhere else. Then he had a daughter, and he says, you must name your daughter Loi Ruchama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chas V'Shalom won't have Rachmanis anymore in Klal Yisrael. And then finally he had a third son, and he said, you must call him Loi Ami, you are not my nation. And then he says, Moshe Rabbeinu, he divorced his wife. How come you're not divorcing your wife? He says, I can't divorce my wife, I had children with her. He said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, you don't even know if they're your children. She's a Zaina, they might not be your children. And you don't want to divorce her, so I should divorce my children, the Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So he realized he did an Aveira by throwing Klal Yisrael under the bus, so to speak. So he started asking Rachmanis on himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, you must first ask Rachmanis on Klal Yisrael. There were 3 Gzeros here. Galus, Loi Ruchama, Loi Ami. I'm not going to have Rachmanis, they're not my nation. So he davened on them, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mevatel the Gzeros, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, they are my nation, I am going to have Rachmanis. Rabbi Yochanan says, in fact, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is koyas on Klal Yisrael, he still has Rachmanis. Rabbi Yochanan says, Oilo leRabbanos kaveres is ba'aleo. Rabbanos, to rule over people like a king, actually buries a person young. In fact, Shayo the Navi outlived Uziyo, Yosem, Achaz, and Chizkiyo. Says Rabbi Yochanan, Yeravam ben Yoash, who is a king of Yisrael. Now the kings of Israel were typically not mentioned; they weren't nimna. So why was he zoicha? Because he wasn't mekabel shenhara on Amos. When they said, Amos said, he's going to kill you. He said, I'm not Mekabel. And even if he said so, maybe he got it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rebbe Lezer says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu only put Klal Yisrael in Golos so that the people from different nations, the Goyim, should become close to Yiddishkeit and should become Geir. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, you see from the story of Isaiah that even when Klal Yisrael is in a terrible situation, they're cursing their father, so to speak, and their mother, you don't throw them under the bus. You don't say Lashon Hara on them. And if you do, you can get punished like Isaiah. It says in the pasuk, Tzidka is perzoid of Yisrael, that's from the Nevuah of Dvaira. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did tzedakah with Klal Yisrael that he spread them out. As the story goes, the Gemara says, the Min told Rebbe Chanina, we are better than you. You had Yoav who went ahead and killed all the Scharim. You live between us and we never killed the Jews. So he said, you're saying such a silly thing that I don't even have to answer you. Let my Talmud talk to you. So he brought Rebbe Shaya. Shaya said, you would love to kill all the Jews. You can't. We're spread out all over the place. And even just to go ahead and kill here and there, you look terrible. What are the nations going to say about you? So he said, that's exactly what it was. We sat around and we discussed how to eliminate the Yidden, and we couldn't come up with a great plan. There's a machlokes. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu send Klal Yisrael to Golus in Bavel? One pshat is because Klal Yisrael couldn't accept the terrible xeris of Edom, of Rome. Rebbe Lezer says because Bavel is closer to the Sha'il, Mimavis Egalem, that's where the Gula is going to come from. Reb Chanina says because Aramaic that they speak in Bavel is similar to the Lashon of Torah. Rabbi Yochanan says because HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent them back to their mother's house, so to speak. Where do we come from? Ur Kasdim. That's where Avram Avinu discovered HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a husband gets upset at his wife, he sends her back to her mother's house. So too, there's three things that went back. Klal Yisrael went back to Bavel. The money and the loot that we took from Mitzrayim went back to Mitzrayim. Eventually, it ended up by Achashverosh. And the words of the Luchais, they flew back to Shamayim. Have a wonderful day.